Hello, Lionesses. This is Bobbie Carlton. I am the publisher and editor-in-chief of Lioness Magazine, as well as the founder of Innovation Women. Today, I am talking with Lauren Zajac. She is the Chief Legal Officer at Workhuman. And as that Chief Legal Officer, she oversees all the legal, regulatory, and compliance affairs for Workhuman. Lauren also serves on the board of Leader Mom. She's the board chair, and she's on the board of the Soul Project. So welcome, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your career trajectory and maybe a little bit more about your role and responsibilities at Workhuman? Parts of which, I don't know about you, but I don't tend to think of them when I first think about the whole chief legal officer thing.
Sure. I think it's funny. Certainly, I have spent my career trajectory. I did not set out to be an expert in Irish companies, but this turned out to be the third Irish company that I've been the general counsel of. So that's my strange happening and expertise that has come out of my experience. So I came out of law school and I had the pleasure of going right in-house. So I have been in-house in tech for more years than I care to admit. But it's really interesting to me that folks look at my role, right, the general counsel or chief legal officer role, and sort of think, well, you must look at all the contracts, or you must be an intellectual property attorney. And those are parts of my role and within my purview. But the reason that I do what I do, and I've done it for so long, and what I do at Workhuman is so much broader than that. And especially, I've had the opportunity at Workhuman to come in at the ground level, to be in very early and essentially be part of the founding team. So my role is obviously the things we've talked about, the contracts and the intellectual property, but it's allowed me to move into places where I think general counsels and chief legal officers are really effective in creating relationships between your executive team, in being the sounding board for your operations manager who wants to start down a path of a different onboarding approach and wants to just pick your brain, the head of products who says, we're looking at a DE&I product. What is your thought as the only female executive in this particular company? So it really is a broader role, and I liken it to, most of my days are really being a part of the executive team, being a participating business member of the executive team, and then I happen to have a legal degree and give counsel in that regard as well. So it's a lot of fun, and it's much broader than most people think.
Lauren, Workhuman is a social recognition and continuous performance management platform. What does that really mean?
What that really means is that Workhuman is about pioneering the human workplace. It really is about encouraging, enabling human connection, both in a recognition perspective and also to help in the performance management process. I think it's oftentimes not given enough priority, the connections between employees, both from keeping employees engaged and incentivized and excited to do their best work. Really at the heart of it is, how do we increase connection between employees? How do we foster connection between employees and create better cultures in that way? And we all know there is true ROI in corporate culture that is positive and all about those good things.
I hear a lot of conversation around employee engagement. Is that a big metric for you and your clients? Is that something you're focused on?
It is. It's funny. I've worked in this space for 14 years. And in the beginning, I will tell you, I was like, employee engagement, what is that? It is a metric we look at. I will tell you that it's sometimes measured and monitored in different ways, depending on the vertical, the industry. High level engagement is really about, are your folks, the ones that you want to keep, which is the majority of your culture, are they wanting to come in every day? Are they excited to do their best work? Are they bringing other employees in, right? There are all these aspects that different companies will weave into their engagement metrics. Are people referring new jobs? Is there a succession path? Is there internal promotion path? All of those things are part of it, but at the heart of it, it is about sort of taking the temperature of the culture of your company, and is it overwhelmingly positive?
So Workhuman is all about recognition and continuous performance management. It's a social recognition and performance management platform. You're focused on keeping employees engaged and motivated and feeling valued. Admittedly tough in today's work climate. How has the pandemic impacted what you do and your clients, what they do?
Yeah, it's an interesting, I have the perspective. I'm lucky to have had the perspective. I've been with the company for about 14 years now. It's funny, when we started, we certainly didn't understand what the potential impact of, for example, an economic downturn in a particular vertical would be. We have a lot of gas and energy clients, right? And so as the economies in those verticals change, we didn't know what the impact was. But over the course of time, we realized that it becomes even more important to engage, to motivate, to keep your employees connected. And so even though we expected in some places where there was a downturn, there in fact was an increased usage. So we shouldn't have been surprised when the pandemic occurred, but we were, that the usage of our platform really took off. We had clients that had a certain contractual commitment that decided out of the course of that commitment to suddenly give every employee a $100 award just for staying with the company and being engaged from home and dealing with your kids in the background, your dog barking, et cetera. So we saw a huge increased usage. And I think that speaks to one of the things that I think we all learned, how important being connected is. And that's what the pandemic sort of showed us and brought us sort of to the other extreme. So we have done really well. And I think it's heightened the drum that we have beaten, that employee connectivity, creating those relationships amongst employees and keeping that going in an engagement platform is a really important part of work.
Yeah. And corporate cultures are so much harder to instill when the employees aren't in the office. So can you share some examples of great corporate cultures that you've been working with, maybe some of your clients?
Sure. We have so many longstanding clients. We have, GE and JetBlue, longstanding clients. It's funny, a lot of my colleagues, when we first signed JetBlue, would get on a JetBlue flight and ask the flight attendants whether they knew about their Lyft program. And inevitably, there would be a discussion and high fives. We've added, just recently, in the last couple of months, onboarded IBM to using our conversations tool, which is our continuous performance management platform. Certainly working with some of those clients, both the existing and then the new. We've seen all sorts of ways that employers have thought out of the box in a way to keep folks connected. One of the things we do is not only offer the conversations tool, as I mentioned, and our core recognition platform, but we have an offering called Celebrations, which is really about celebrating all of the things that happened in life. We obviously, one of the things we did early on was celebrate birthdays, but now even within our company, we celebrate a new pet, a new home, obviously a marriage, right? All of those things that you might just talk about at the water cooler when you're meeting in the kitchen, but being able to share a picture or a video and then have every one of your contacts, really the whole company, see and comment on that is a way that we've seen thousands of iterations of that. And it certainly has helped people to stay connected even during the pandemic.
Absolutely. So we're talking about rewards, incentives. Can you give us some best practices on those things for some of our listeners who are running their own companies? What are the things that they should be adopting?
Well, we have a philosophy at Workhuman for sure. There are recognition companies that don't believe that there should be any sort of monetary value ascribed, and that really the act of thanking is a big part of it. And obviously that is a huge part of what I have seen play out, both in my own career, watching clients do that as well. But adding a meaningful award, that's kind of, we make the delineation between the monetary and non-monetary in that way, and being able to tie that back to a particular moment. One of the things that we added a few years back, which seems sort of intuitive, but as you're living in the recognition world, some of those things you go, oh, that makes sense, was an ability for the person who receives the award and then redeems maybe a few amalgamated rewards to go back and both remember the moment and then thank the person that gave them that award. It really, what it does is, and I've experienced it myself, right, being there for 14 years, you kind of go back and review your award history and think, oh, wow, that was such a great win, or that was such a great project that we completed. It really just elongates the process and the impact of those rewards and really takes it to a whole nother level, because you're now revisiting that good feeling, that win that you had way down the path potentially.
Interesting. So the good news for all of us and for Workhuman, I'm sure as well, is that the pandemic brought home literally some of the biggest work issues for women in particular. So hundreds of thousands of women left the workforce, scaled back when their kids were forced to stay home. Now we're seeing a little bit of this light at the end of the tunnel talk. You were mentioning your kids are going back to school, and, you know, like, do you believe the pandemic is really going to permanently change things, including how we treat our female employees?
It's a good question. I mean, obviously, we're seeing some of the metrics on the numbers of women that left the workforce during the pandemic that are still out of the workforce. My hope is that changes. I do think, sort of putting the pandemic aside, and we'll see how it plays out. One of the trends that I started to see that was giving me a good amount of hope going forward for those issues was the fact that companies are starting to, you've heard the term ESG investing, really be investing, Wall Street and private equity investing in companies that show that they're creating sustainable practices, that they're engaging in activities that support their community. And part of that was obviously an equity amongst women and other genders and other normally underrepresented minorities. That being a trend gives me hope that we'll get to a place that's more equitable. But obviously, we've got to have some solution coming out of the pandemic that gets women back into the workforce in the numbers that they were at before, and hopefully higher.
Yeah. So before the pandemic, I think we all kind of thought about working from home a little differently than the reality was. Kids were going to be in school and daycare and being cared for by a nanny or whatever it was. With everyone working remotely where possible, do you think it changed how we think about working from home?
I think that, and my only evidence is anecdotal, obviously my experience and talking to my colleagues and friends, I heard the same, which I'm sure you did too. I heard the same, different versions of the same story, that I think for a long time we sort of said as a phrase, work-life balance, work-life harmony. How do you strike the right balance, especially as working women, as working mothers? But honestly, I don't think that at least for me, I'll speak for myself only. I don't know that I ever truly understood what that meant, right? To me, before the pandemic, for sure, it meant really not being, present in the moment with my kids and not being present in the moment sometimes at work, right? You're thinking about one while you're in the other situation. For me, as difficult as it was having 3 teenagers home during the pandemic and all eating off the same Wi-Fi network, et cetera, never mind the food bills and dishes, it's certainly the forced slowdown really allowed me to evaluate that statement, work-life harmony, work-life balance, in a more meaningful way. And I think look, it was an awful thing. Obviously, none of us would ever want to experience it, but that for me was the positive. That certainly I was able to kind of take a real look at what that meant for me, and I think it's a different question for everyone. But I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to, for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I want to switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
So you've taken on some board work.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk a little bit about that? Tell us about the companies that you're on the boards of.
Sure. So I have long been passionate about creating equity for women and for other minorities. I think it's funny. I started out, as we talked about earlier, I started out in tech as a young lawyer, frankly, not really understanding what some of those hurdles would be. And spent some time kind of, as a junior lawyer, moved my way up, was a general counsel for the first time at 29 years old, which that was an experience unto itself. So I had been, started to be in roles where I was the only female executive. And honestly, I think, I credit my upbringing, right? I was brought up by parents who really truly said that I could do anything and be anyone. And so that was a wonderful place to step off from. But when I first started to experience some of the things that women experience in the workplace, I was shocked. Right? Having worked really hard to get to where I was and slaving away for hours, even after most people left the office, that I would start to hear, sort of derogatory comments about, well, how did you get this position and who, right? It shocked me. So it added fuel to the fire of something that was already important to me, which was making sure that women in the workplace have a voice, are truly authentic, and sort of own their place, right? Stake their claim on what the rest of the world has. So I have been exposed at Workhuman to an incredible array of folks that are working in those areas. And the first group of those folks was Leader Mom. And what they are trying to do is both build a community, provide resources, and mentor and coach women who are leaders and who are moms or who are to aspire to be those things. And there aren't enough folks doing that work. And so I was so moved when I first met them and heard their presentation that I sort of uncharacteristic of me, right? I'm always sort of the admirer and, clapping in the background, but I raised my hand and said, like, this is such important work. I need to help you. Like, I want to help you. And so I have had the pleasure for a couple of years of serving as the chair of their board. It is incredibly exciting and rewarding work. There need to be more folks doing this. And the things we have seen, right? Just creating a community and especially, certainly helping peers and other folks that are in similar roles to mine is truly rewarding. But the younger women who are coming into the workforce who you can give a nugget of wisdom, and it's funny to you, right? You reflect on yourself and your experience, and that you're able to give those pearls of wisdom to anyone still is laughable to me, but it's super fun. So I'm super happy to help them in their work, and I'm really proud of what Leader Mom is doing. And then the other board that I sit on is the Soul Project. It's funny, I was taking a yoga class with my best friend, and we were getting a coffee afterwards, and we were waiting in line, and there were these pictures all along the wall, pictures of women dressed to the nines and very, formal photography. And she and I sort of chit-chatted, right? We're kind of in our sweats and our yoga clothes and no makeup and disheveled. And we both sort of said, oh, well, she's probably this, and she probably works on Wall Street. And the embarrassing part is that as we made our way through the line, and then we were able to read the notes at the bottom of the pictures, we realized what the Soul Project was. It is a project to take these photographs, these portraits of women who have had any number of struggles, drug addiction, domestic violence, you name it. And so each of those descriptions told the story. And as we got further and further and realized the stories, we both became incredibly embarrassed. And I will say, we had this conversation having the coffee, like I thought I was open-minded and didn't have any unconscious bias, and that especially amongst women, I would never have made those judgments. But by the time we ordered our coffee and sat down, I realized that I had some work to do. So when the opportunity came and the Soul Project kind of moved out of its initial stages and they started to build the board, I did the same thing and raised my hand and said, I have work to do and I want to help you do this incredible work. And it has been tremendous fun. We're having our second event on June 18th. I certainly have it posted on all of my social media, and I will just say that hearing some of these women, and we call them the Soul Ambassadors, tell their stories and continuing to undo some of that unconscious bias and continue to open your mind to different paths to success and different stories of success is an amazingly emotional experience. So it's been really rewarding for me.
That sounds terrific. Now, did you reach out to them? Did they reach out to you? How'd you get directly connected to these projects?
I reached out to them after we had that coffee meeting, and I certainly under the guise of the Workhuman kind of synergy, I said, so I work for this company. This is what we do. They were originally going to come present at our Workhuman Live event, which was then canceled by the pandemic. So that was the initial point of connection. And then I continued to work with them. So it's been a real pleasure.
That's great. So many female entrepreneurs that I speak with, one of their big challenges is attracting quality board members. So what kinds of things can they do, would you suggest, for them to attract someone like you to their board?
I think that, both of those scenarios were for me, luckily, through my kind of day job. The places where I've had other opportunities have really been, and it's funny because I struggled for a long time wanting to be on boards and do some things that really meant something to me personally. The places where I've had opportunities were not through kind of any formalized process. They were really through word of mouth and networking. I have to say, early in my career, maybe because of my role as a lawyer initially, or I don't know what to chalk it up to, but I probably didn't spend enough time networking. And I have found in my later years that especially connecting with women in a networking capacity can bring all sorts of opportunities. And that's, for me, that's how I would go about it.
That sounds terrific. So as we kind of come to the close of our time here, can you give us some tips, whether it's from your Workhuman life or your legal life, if you are talking directly to a woman entrepreneur, someone who is working on her startup, what are you telling her? What are some tips you can share?
I think first and foremost, I guess I'll tell you a story to better answer that. Some years ago, I was working with a company that was engaging in a pretty significant corporate transaction. And I went, I'm a lawyer. I was pretty confident in my experience, but I walked into the room and there were about 35 other folks, mostly men. And I knew what their backgrounds were. They were big bankers and from big law firms, and sort of uncharacteristically, but I think women probably have this experience all the time. I was almost frozen in my tracks, intimidated, thinking that, I know my value, but look at all these other people. What could they possibly want to hear from me? And somehow I got myself over that frozen moment and started to speak early in the meeting and quickly realized that I knew more about the particular topic than all of them. And so I would have said to myself before that meeting, just own your value. I think we, as women, we undersell ourselves. We often think that people know more than we do. And not that you have to know everything. I think the other piece of advice I would give, and this is a hard thing to do, especially as a lawyer, because people come to you for the answer. Hire people that know more than you and be confident enough to look to them for answers and be vulnerable with your other founders or your other executives and with the people that work for you. I think the thing that has helped me in my career the most is creating strong relationships. in all sorts of ways. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to just show some of your authentic self to the other person. It's certainly one of the things that Workhuman has helped me to learn, is that authentic relationships really matter in every aspect, certainly in our personal lives, but in work just as much.
Great lessons. Today, we've been talking with Lauren Zajac. She's the Chief Legal Officer at Workhuman. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you, Bobbie. Take care.